Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hypothetically Speaking, the show where we talk about anything unexplained, unsolved, and unnatural. We've filmed two this month, which is up from the
Very,
none
very
for
few
two
for the
months.
last little bit.
But anyways, we are here um to talk about what Morgan has picked for us.
Yes. So we will be talking about some ancient technologies that continue to be a mystery. Um, some of these we have some idea of how they probably functioned, but just don't quite understand why or how they were able to make them at that point in time in history. And then some of them we are still just outright positively baffled at what it is and why it exists. So with that, we're gonna start out with a kind of silly, goofy one. This is the Longyou Caves. They are located within China, and essentially it is a group of 24 artificial sandstone caves. They have
Hmm.
positively zero idea why these caves were made. There is no sort of artifacts or things around to explain what they were here for. Essentially, what happened is that there were a group of four farmers in 1992 that decided to drain some water out of five small ponds in their village. And when they did this, the ponds turned out to be five really large man made caverns. And after looking a little further, they found that there were 19 other caverns.
Oh my gosh.
They have
Wow.
determined that they're more than 2,000 years old. There are no historical documents or anything to explain their construction. There's nothing that discusses these caverns existing or what they were used for. Like, there is no cultural context for what these are at all. There is no historical context for these existing. They just looked at them and did some cool science stuff to go, wow, these are really old. What on earth happened here? Um, in doing so, they have found a little bit of material after they found these, and did manage to find a 17th century poem somewhere within the region that vaguely mentions caverns. And so they're assuming that this 17th century poem is probably referring to these caverns because they don't know what else it possibly could be. Um, and then with a bit more time, they have found that there was some clay and silt within the caves that they were able to date back to 206 BC. And then some materials were dated to around 23 AD. Uh, that
That's
is some range.
that is wild.
So there's some wild time frame happening with these. There's some wildness in 19 really large caverns that were excavated by man over 2,000 years ago.
I
These ca
Also, not the reference, the vague reference to caverns.
they're like, this is the best we got. We think this is the only thing we've seen that in theory could be referencing these.
really reaching for the stars on that
Yeah,
one.
they're like, It's all we got." The caves are notable for a few different reasons. They are very, very large for like a human-made excavated cave. The average floor area of each cave is about 11,000 square feet. The ceiling height is 98 feet. For anyone using the metric system, that's going to be about 1,000 meters squared for the floor area and then about 30 meters high for the height. And then total area covered can be in excess of 320,000 square feet. That would be about 30,000 square meters. So like these are not only like are there a bunch of them and they don't seem to have a lot of rhyme or reason to why they exist, but like they're massive. They're very, very large caves that take up like a lot of area. The ceiling, wall, and then there's like pillar surface, pillars that are used for like structural supports because, one cannot dig a cave
Yeah.
this big underground and not have it collapse upon their head.
It's also about 14 Paxtons, I calculated.
Brilliant. That's a lot of
I was
Paxton's tall.
wondering if we would get a conversion to Paxton.
I was doing it.
Uh,
I was like 6 point whatever, and then I just kept putting in numbers until I got close.
yeah. One of our favorite measuring systems for those unaware is the height of my fiance, who is rather tall as a unit of measurement, because Americans truly will use anything but the metric system.
And it's funny.
Yeah,
Hey, I
it's
prefer
fantastic.
measuring in Paxtons
It
personally.
has more scale for me. It
It
means
Yeah.
keeps
something.
things present. It's like
Yeah,
mindfulness.
yeah,
Mindfulness.
for sure. But yeah, so these caves, like all of the pillar surfaces, ceilings, walls are finished in the same way, and like these are like made in rock. And so you can see a bunch of parallel bands that are about, 24 inches wide, and it has like parallel chiseling marks that are essentially like pretty strong evidence that these were like clearly dug out. They aren't like just a naturally occurring sort of situation. So I think a lot of the largest questions they have is one, why were they made? They're like pretty uniform in construction and design. They don't have any cross-connecting passages, so every cave is its own individual separate like large area. They're not connected in any way. And so they're very confused why a person would take the amount of time it would take and the amount of effort and the amount of rock you would have to move to excavate each of these caves and then to just not connect them seems odd. Um, that being said, they haven't seen any evidence of any apparent damage or loss of structural integrity to these caves, despite the fact that they were carved out 2,000 years ago.
That's that's
Bonkers.
wild to me,
Hmm.
Bonkers.
especially since they were submerged for who knows how
Yeah,
long.
to be underwater and
Yeah.
like and
I s-
granted that probably stopped people from like messing with it and
yeah,
damaging it with like foot traffic and
True.
stuff
and
and like
like
touching
s
things,
still
but still
pools probably don't like erode as fast as obviously like a river.
flowing water, but it's still
Yeah,
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
And so
Also,
it's
like sandstone is
very
it is
very
it's
soft.
pretty yeah, it's pretty susceptible to erosion, I thought.
Yeah,
I also assume so. And so the
sandstone
fact
and
that
limestone are both very.
yeah. And so the fact that you can still see like where it was chiseled and like they've been able to figure out like the degree that you would hold like chisel at to make these markings and stuff, like to be able to tell to that degree despite it being that old is positively bonkers to me.
Hmm.
Like what materials were you running around with digging out this really large cavern? And also that's so much time and effort for why? For what
Yeah.
reason?
Yeah, I think that's also interesting is I mean, I know that, caverns and caves could be used for like a lot of different reasons, but
Hmm. I
Yeah.
like
had
there's like religious reasons
And to
is
make like
probably what comes to mind the
that many
most.
of them in an area is perplexing to me.
And also to have nothing but like a very vague poem written
Yeah.
about it.
Like you'd
Like,
think people would be talking about these caves. Like if I built them, I would presume it'd be for something that people would maybe talk about.
it makes
yeah, because
me
it's not just like, a random farmer in the area was like, "Oh, I'm gonna build a bunch of caves and
oh
caverns."
That
yeah.
would have been
Like
a
this was
weird
a
pick. Like this,
public project.
yeah, this would have
Before
taken
you
some people and some effort, and I just don't
Mhm.
understand.
Before you talked about the scale, I totally was like, is this like a the children yearn for the mines? Like kids will always dig a hole.
Yeah, yeah. I
Like
don't, I don't think the children did this.
no,
It's so
no.
tall. It's 98 feet tall. That is wild.
Um
Like the scaffolding they would have had to build to even do this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
the the thing that came to mind for me, which I is total shot in the dark. I don't know
Yeah,
if this is a theory at all, but like food storage possibly. It's cooler.
definitely possible.
It's a lot of space
It's
for
a
food
lot of
storage.
caves though, and they're
It's
so
a lot of
tall.
Yeah.
caves.
Like if you're gonna do food storage, I think you want like more surface area rather than like building up.
Yeah.
'Cause like yeah,
'Cause-
they could have like made shelves, but like
I
the
also feel
large
like
cavernous space with pillars doesn't really give we put a bunch of shelving to your vibes.
no,
the other
it
thing
does.
too is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It does remind me a little bit of, this is my only connection
Yeah.
is that I had a book when I was a kid and
Yeah.
it was about people from North America, like original ice bridge
Yeah.
crossing native
Yeah.
people from America,
Yeah.
and how during the Ice Age, like it was a fiction book, but it was based on actual,
Actual history.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is accurate. They would, because it's like the ground is frozen,
Yeah.
they would dig a pit into the ground and cover it, and it would preserve like mammoth.
Yeah.
That so they would kill a mammoth a year, it would
Yeah, for
preserve it.
sure.
And then they dig out the ground every year to get rid of the melted, mucky part.
Yeah.
So like in theory, but it's not s soil.
Yeah.
They're doing this with rock, which makes it feel very different, and I would be
Yeah.
I'm so confused why it's
It's not
almost
like a
100 feet
casual
tall.
activity to
Hmm.
excavate that. It's so weird. It's so odd.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was the first one I thought was a little silly goofy. This next
Yeah.
one is where the premise of this came from. Shout out to Allison for sending me this. But the Portolan charts, these were essentially really old nautical charts. Some of the earliest known examples of this come from around the late 13th, early 14th century. They're predominantly found in the Mediterranean region, and then they usually cover areas between the Atlantic coast, Western Europe, and like North Africa, and then they cover part of the Black Sea. And so essentially, these maps came in a couple different forms. Sometimes it would be one larger map that shows all of these areas together on one map, or they would come in essentially like an atlas where you'd have pages showing different areas a little more close up of this larger overarching map, and then they would just be separate pages that you could kind of like put them together to see the larger region if you really wanted to. Um, this name for it came from essentially rooted in the word ports and harbors, um, because it was primarily used for sailing directions. And they are old enough that they're like on vellum sheets, rather than alternate forms of paper that were made later on in history. And they are really interesting, primarily because they are made in really, really good scale. And so these maps are really well calibrated to like what the actual globe looks like. And so part of their confusion with them is that they don't have any previous versions of these charts. So it doesn't look like they started here and they researched more and they found different things. They have like baseline, this is what these maps look like. Why are they in such good scale? And the really interesting part is based on the way they're drawn, they are so accurate to the way the coastlines function in these areas that they cannot have been made essentially with the thought that the earth is flat or without going to these places and like having seen them to make this
Hmm.
map. Like they cannot just be projections of what would be out there. They would have had to have seen these locations or had firsthand accounts from people who went to these locations. Like this
Hmm.
is not something that would have just they couldn't have conjectured this map
Yeah.
Yeah. When
unless if they
there's
Also,
perchance understood that the earth was like round, maybe, but that
yeah.
seems really improbable.
when
Also,
was this dated to? When are they dated
Uh,
to?
they are dated to the late 13th, early 14th century.
Okay. That's
And and
not
so
like
it's it's not
terribly.
it's not the wildest thing in the world. They just don't understand why there is no historical evolution in the
yeah.
creation of this map. It just exists.
Also, if you've seen maps Like I've seen maps from later in that time period, like maps of
that
the
are
Americas
bad.
and stuff that are
They're
really,
so bad. Their scale is
really bad.
trash.
Yeah.
Like they're
Scale is trash. It
yeah.
makes like California was drawn as an island for a very, very long time, even after California was determined to not be an island.
I love
It
that.
So
was
So,
drawn as an island.
they're just wildly accurate maps of the sea from that time. They don't have tons and tons of scale for how they were created, and so the struggle is for one person to have made this in that time frame would have been really, really difficult. And so they feel
mhm.
the most likely thing is that someone talked to a bunch of sailors that could have been trading in different areas or something along those lines and then gotten a lot of firsthand accounts for them. Even in doing that, though, they just don't understand how the maps could have been as accurate to what the
Yeah.
coastlines actually look like as they truly are.
And were these the Greeks or were these
These would have been Mediterranean area. They were primarily given the way they're named by the Italians, I would presume they had a large part in like finding them.
yeah.
Um,
But that I mean that knowledge, at least
yeah,
the earth
the
beat curvature
Earth being
thing,
round, and so it makes sense that they probably would have been a little bit more accurate.
because yeah,
Yeah,
they started learning the curvature like in like
yeah,
as I checked it 300 BC.
yeah. And
So
so
that
they
part at
definitely
least,
would have
yeah.
had some scale there. They are kind of an interesting map because they have what's called a rhumbline network. And so essentially they have compass roses on various points in the map, and then they show lines of constant bearing, bearing or like windrose lines is essentially what they called them. And they were really, really thought to be very, very helpful for people in figuring out orientation in like seafaring and making sure you stay on track to where you're going and things. So they were pretty fascinating. They had quite a few symbols to represent various hazards. They had like reefs and rocks and shoals and sandbanks and things like that included on a lot of them to show any sort of like risk that you may have while sailing. And then a lot of one of the oldest cartographic artifacts in the Library of Congress actually is one of these maps.
Interesting.
Ooh, that's fun.
Yeah. So,
Okay, this is really off topic, but my university that I go to, the law library, has a copy of the Magna Carta
ooh,
from a very, very old copy of the Magna Carta,
that's very
um,
cool.
from like 1460s.
Ooh, that's cool.
And I got to hold it. Oh,
I
it's
That's very cool.
I
I
was
love
kind of
that.
surprised they let me. They let us hold it, to be honest.
That's fair.
Did you have to like wear gloves?
No, oh, sorry, 1556. No,
Oh,
we did have to wash our hands.
that makes
Oh,
sense. I
Yeah,
think
but
that does make.
it might be
Because,
the
like,
sort of thing where it is preserved, but also it is such a well preserved document
you know,
where
that
it's
they're a
a
little
little
less
less,
concerned.
yeah.
It's not gonna, like, disintegrate once you tap
It's
it.
it's not the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
yes, and we are also not um stealing it
That's true.
Uh, such a good
and
film.
trying to find a map on the back.
That's but possibly by burning it.
Yeah, possibly. Okay. Our next thing that people struggle to understand. Uh, please note, I will probably say this incorrectly. Lycurgus Cup, which is essentially a chalice. It's made of glass and then it has like really ornate um, gilt silver that is used for the rim and the foot of it. So it's kind of like a port wine glass kind of thing where it has a much shorter stem to it, but does
Hmm.
have like a base and like pretty gilt around the top of it. It is very, very pretty. It is very intricately patterned. Um, this is Roman glass that is from the 4th century. This style of cup is called a cage cup, and it's made of what they call diacratic glass. And so essentially,
Oh,
this
that is
glass
so
will
pretty.
look a different color depending on which way the light is passing through the glass. So, like if you move it around, like the glass will change shade and color as you do so. Um, and then if the glass is lit from like behind it, it looks red. And then if you light it from in front of it, it looks like it's green. And so that's part of like the oddness of how it functions. It is the only complete Roman glass object made of this type of glass. So I think they found other like pieces of this glass in other places. It's just never been a whole complete item. It's been broken, shattered shards of it. This is also has very, very impressive change in color. Like even the broken pieces they've managed to find of this type of glass don't have this much difference between the way it looks in different lighting. It's often described as the most spectacular glass of this period, and it is very, very fittingly decorated. This cup itself essentially can be achieved to our understanding of like how we would think to make it now would be using nanoparticles. And so you would essentially take gold and silver and you would disperse it in colloidal form throughout the glass material. The process that they used, we cannot comprehend. We do not understand how they possibly could have done this. Like even now, we're like, this would be a struggle to make. And so essentially, like from a chemical standpoint, we understand what it was made from. They also know that the makers would have had to have understood and controlled contamination. Um, and so they would have probably put in tiny bits, they think most likely, of gold and silver dust, based on their understanding of like the material composition of it. Just scientifically, they've been able to look at it and see what's in it. They just don't quite understand how they would have managed to manufacture it. And so it's in so
Hmm.
much, so small of components of the gold and silver dust. It would have to be so incredibly fine that they're like, we don't think they could have potentially added this proportion. They would have had to have essentially like mixed it and then just kept adding glass until they reached like an appropriate level of mix. They also don't think one person could have manufactured this, so they think that there were probably like 3 or 4 different processes where like someone would have had to have made the glass and then likely would have had to send it somewhere else to have the glass be blown and like pattern the way that it is.
Mm.
Just based on the stuff that they found in various areas of Rome, it seems really, really improbable that all of the features of this could have been made in one location. And so like they think the like motifs on the glass versus like the metalwork for it look different enough that like they feel that they would have had to have been made in different regions, which to me raises the class question like why would you do this for a cup? Like to travel across the Roman Empire to build different portions. Like it's a cool cup, don't get me wrong, but like why?
For
Yeah.
somebody with enough money to commission it.
Yes. So
Yeah.
they definitely like have a strong component understanding of how this would function. They just can't quite grasp how they would have managed to manufacture it at that time. Because it requires some crazy chemistry stuff to like make that work.
I want to drink out of it.
It
I
looks
mean,
So
very cool.
also, I feel like to make multiple, like multiple things made out of
Yeah,
this glass is like
yeah,
a whole other thing. Because there's like
yeah,
one thing if it's happened essentially by accident, right? Like you
yeah.
essentially you get lucky with
We're
the amount
making it,
of,
there was weird dust that got in there, and now look, it's
yeah.
weird glass.
But to be able to like recreate it, I
Yeah.
assume, I mean, I guess it's possible it's not, but like I
To find
wouldn't
multiple
naturally,
shards of it, I wouldn't assume that happened by accident repeatedly.
yeah, I wouldn't assume it happened by accident repeatedly. I also wouldn't assume that everything happened in like one batch,
Yeah.
you know? Um,
yeah, it's probably a a very specific and like specialized thing
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
like and with the fall and everything, it probably just was completely like
Yeah.
lost because
Yeah.
who's gonna recreate that when all the people who could probably do it
We're worried about
are
food.
yeah, like there's no it's a very like it is gorgeous and it is amazing and I love when people do
It
things
is a
where
thing of art.
I
Hmm.
love when people do things where they're like, "Hi, honey," where they're like so good at it we cannot understand it even today.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is inherently a frivolous thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's also possible that it was really only like a couple artisans in a very small amount of time who figured this out and for whatever reason couldn't pass on that knowledge.
Or
Yeah,
refuse
Like,
to. Like
or
that
sometimes it
refuse
too.
becomes a
to.
thing
Yeah.
of trade where they want to sell this specific item and they don't want to teach someone else how to make it.
Yeah.
hmm That is
Yeah.
Yeah.
wild though. And I guess I don't know, is it even just the fact that they got like gold and silver into a colloidal state
Yes. It's
at that
weird. I
time,
don't
Hmm.
understand. It's so odd.
which if you don't know, it's basically like from my understanding, separating the particles and it becomes like a liquid almost, which is why it would be
Yeah,
mixable with glass and create a very
correct.
uniform effect.
That is my understanding as well. And so, like, that gets into a whole chemistry thing that I'm a little confused about,
Hmm.
to be
Yeah.
honest with you. So I'm stumped at why they figured this out. Because again, I
Yeah.
don't think you'd accidentally create that. Like, if that's what they think they mixed in, you would have to do that on purpose.
hmm I don't think I, in my entire life, have ever had like any actual chemical reaction in a class go correctly, unless you count baking soda and vinegar. So
I've had a few not
I'm
go
so out of
terribly, but
I'm
they
so out
never
of my
seem to
depth.
be perfect.
Yes.
It's always not the right color, or one
Yeah.
time I made weird globs when it was supposed to just be normal. I
Uh,
don't know how, and neither does my teacher at the time.
but yeah, so odd cup. It's very pretty. Um,
It is very, very pretty. I
Very
think a
interesting.
crisp appy juice
10 out
would
of 10 in that cup.
would go so hard.
I think that this is now the cup I will envision every time people talk about the Holy Grail because it's really hard
It
to imagine a cooler cup than this.
it
Mm.
is like yeah, I love a goblet though. I'm such a
Yeah.
goblet person.
Yeah.
Um, I own three now.
Numerous.
I got a dragon one. It's not very like traditional, but I got one
Yeah.
at the last Ren fair I went to. It was very fun. Hi,
All
sir.
right.
The
Next up,
if he steps on my keyboard and I go away, just know that's why.
the price of having a cat, alas. So next up, we have one of the more well-known of the confusing ancient technologies, that being Greek fire.
Mm.
Greek
Mm,
fire is really, really interesting. It was essentially used a lot in naval warfare. And essentially, what you're looking at is a substance that could very quickly and very aggressively set boats on fire. It was an incendiary weapon system that was used primarily by the Byzantine Empire from the 7th to the 14th centuries. Bit of span there. The recipe for Greek fire was a really closely guarded state secret, and a lot of historians have had various speculations on what was contained within it. Um, they essentially would take what's basically a grenade loaded with Greek fire and they would toss it onto enemy ships, or they would spray it from tubes, and it would start boats on fire and it would burn even on water, which made it really, really successful when you are doing so on water. Um, because you couldn't put it out. Like you were out in the ocean with your boat on fire, no way to put it out. What were you gonna do? Like that's a pretty effective way to end your naval battle.
That's pretty
That's
game over
true.
moment.
It's really hard to come back from that. And so this was such a destructive naval weapon that almost everybody they encountered and everyone within their region tried to recreate this, and zero people succeeded. No one else could figure out how this worked at the
Yeah.
time, and we for years did not understand it. We have a much better idea of what they most likely did now. Um, but with Greek fire, they have used a couple other names. So sometimes it's referred to as sea fire or liquid fire just because of the way it works on water. And then it can also be referred to as manufactured fire or war fire. All of these are translations from like various people that they fought. All of these different regions they got into naval battles with created their own name for this awful, destructive, very scary fire that would be launched at their ships. Like we have a lot of record of this. Um, they have a few different incendiary flaming weapons that we've seen in the past using things like sulfur or petroleum. And these worked well. I mean, they'd put them on like catapults and launch them over walls and things like that throughout history, but none of them seemed to work in water quite the same way. And so they've had a couple different substances that they assumed might be within it. One of the first things they assumed it contained was saltpeter, which essentially would have made it like a really early form of gunpowder. And essentially, a lot of descriptions of this talked about this thunderous sound and smoke. And so,
Mm.
based on some of those descriptions, they thought something like gunpowder could have created that kind of result. And then they also talked about the distance the flames could be projected from their like siphons, which would have suggested some form of explosive discharge to explain the distance that they would have been able to like shoot this essentially.
Hmm.
Um, And so this would have been a proposition kind of made, they referred to it as a French school. So this was a theory made by chemists during the 19th century in France. They subsequently rejected this because saltpeter does not appear to have been used in warfare in Europe in the Middle East before the 13th century. It's also absent from the accounts of any Muslim readers who were the or writers who were the foremost chemists of the early medieval world. And so essentially they've reached the point of like these people were some of the most heavily chemically educated people in the world and they didn't talk about this at all. So like the odds
Yeah.
that they encountered this, even if it's this secret material that they weren't prone to talk about, seems pretty improbable.
Wasn't it, wasn't gunpowder first really seen in
Like,
China? Or
yeah,
am I
in
mistaken?
China.
It definitely would have been more predominant there as an initial thing. I mean, like stuff like fireworks came from China and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah.
like some of the earlier forms of it definitely were, to my knowledge, most dominantly there. I please note we are not history experts. We are operating on our niche interest and love to research things on the internet. So like with a grain of salt, that is my understanding.
Yes.
Yeah.
We try to be as accurate as possible, but we are,
We are not professionals doing like a PhD on this. This is
Yeah.
for
yeah.
funsies.
Yeah.
We
So
also talk about cryptids, so
Yeah.
this,
We talk about
this,
conspiracy theories.
yes.
We're only meant to be taken so seriously.
last episode we ranked Yule Boys, so
Yeah.
Take much a grain of saltpeter
Yes. Um,
with our
yes.
opinions. And
So,
yeah, I'm gonna look that up
yeah.
though, just to be safe.
For the second item, they do think that it potentially could have contained quicklime. Um, and essentially, part of the suggestion there is that some of the accounts of it claim that essentially adding water intensified the flames, which, as you can imagine, would be a
Interesting.
horrifying thing to see on your boat. And so they kind of suggested quicklime because it will have this reaction with water. It was known and used by Byzantines and Arabs in warfare, and the issue is this theory is refuted by some literary and empirical evidence. So for quicklime substances to start on fire, there must be water. Um, there are multiple examples where Greek fire was poured directly onto the decks of enemy ships. And so enemy boats at that point in time, really all boats at that point of time, wouldn't have had much in the way of like sealants to protect the wood on them. And as a result, the wood was pretty much always wet. It was the state and nature of it. It kind of helped preserve some of it better than letting it like dry rot, in some cases too. And so the decks would have been damp. They're just not sure if it would have been wet enough to truly cause the reaction that you would
Hmm.
expect to see out of quicklime to like truly make it like start on fire, start on fire. They're also described sometimes as being used like grenades with the Greek fire, which kind of reinforces the idea that you wouldn't necessarily need water for it to ignite. Like it would have reacted kind of on its own, even if you weren't at open sea. They also presented the material of calcium phosphide, which is essentially um, you boil bones in like a sealed vessel, and to their understanding, you most likely would have used like urine as a liquid that you're boiling this in. And it essentially would have, when it like made contact with water, ignited spontaneously. And so they've made pretty extensive experiments with this. It definitely like functions similarly to what it would look like. It's just not as destructive. It quite frankly, anytime they ran tests on it, just wouldn't have the intensity that they kind of got from any firsthand account of anyone seeing Greek fire.
But
And so
the
they,
materials would make sense. I imagine
yeah,
they would have plentiful amounts of both
yes,
from.
you would think that this would be readily available. And so currently they can't necessarily rule out the presence altogether of quicklime or saltpeter or something like that in the substance. They just don't think it could possibly be the primary ingredient. And so most modern scholars have reached the point where they think that it was probably based either on crude or refined petroleum. And so essentially they think that what they made is like old napalm. Um,
Yeah.
which tracks. Like that's is very similar. Like any descriptions I've heard of Greek fire sound similar to what I imagine napalm to be like, in my understanding of how it functions. Um, and so they're still not 100% sure what they made it with. They think that it probably had other stuff combined to it because they guarded it like a recipe. You wouldn't do that if it was just like, look, thing from ground, we throw it at you. Like there's
Yeah.
obviously other substances present there. And so one of those other materials could have been used as like a key ignition factor to like
Yeah.
get the petroleum burning. And then it truly would have been game over. Like it would have
Yeah.
been the awful, horrifying fire that you see described. Um,
Yeah.
so I do
Well,
think that's the most
and
probable like primary ingredient, but I do think one of those other materials is probably what sparks it and starts it on fire.
Mixes it in.
and
Uh,
if other like if other uh civilizations at that time were trying to recreate this and weren't able to, that
Yeah.
also like I feel like other places had access to things like
Other
crude
places had to
petroleum.
have seen crude oil. Like it's there's
So
no way this
like
is the only place.
absolutely.
There's no way the
So
Arabs hadn't seen crude oil. Are you kidding me? It's not, I'm not buying it. That's not possible, I don't believe.
yeah,
yeah,
So
that
they
wouldn't make
definitely would
sense to
have
me.
it would have had some kind of
so it would have had to have
recipe.
had, yeah, in my opinion, there would have had to have been other materials for them to not be able to figure out how they
How
did it.
to work make it.
I
Um,
did look it up, and gunpowder is believed largely by
yeah.
scholars to have been created in China
Okay.
around the 11th century, and
Dang.
then it started to move its way
Yeah.
westward
Okay.
after that. But that was like the first like working recipe was in
Yeah.
like the 11th century, and they
Yeah.
refined it from there.
Okay. Interesting. So yeah,
Automatic loading crossbows were also invented in China, I think.
honestly wild. I could see where that would be very helpful.
Yeah,
Um,
I've started getting into a lot of it's just recently it's hasn't been like my intention, I guess, like but I've read a lot of books that are like historical fantasy based in China or Chinese lore in some way or
Hmm.
another. And I'm like, there's so much. Like
Because like Poppy Wars is,
Poppy
and then you're
Wars,
just starting Jade Legacy, which is,
Jade City, and then She Who Became the Sun.
yeah,
Mm.
there's
Or
some good ones. There's
yeah,
a lot of, it's a really good setting for like
it is a very
a
good setting.
more historically set fantasy world. You can do some fun
And
things
there's
in it.
there's so much like rich mythology too.
Yeah,
Hmm.
there's
Like,
a lot of history to draw on
yeah.
there.
I've been watching a lot of like, and it's an archaeologist on YouTube and he does like just the Americas. And so I've been watching a lot about like South American um like peoples before like pre-Columbus. And then also it talks about like the Plains folks and like Inuit, like those
Hmm.
tribes too. And
Give me
I've
the
been thinking about
Mississippi
that.
Mounds.
Yes.
So I have one more for today. I found a lot of other ones though, so I could do this again in the future. There are so many
That
cool
would be fun.
ancient things.
Hmm.
Um, this one I found to be the most interesting from what I looked at today. It is the Antikytherian mechanism.
I
And
know about this
so,
one. This one's super
yes,
cool.
it's so cool. And so essentially, they were doing dives, looking at shipwrecks off the coast of the Greek island. And this was in 1901, um, where they essentially began doing this. And then in 1902, someone noticed this item contained a gear. And so essentially they were going on dives and they found this really corroded piece of metal and they went like, cool piece of metal from a shipwreck, pretty old. They kept everything from these dives. Like they continued to research and look into things. It wasn't viewed as a very interesting item when they hauled it up. It was pretty rusted. It was a hunk of metal that had been underwater for some time. And so when they initially found it in 1901, they didn't do much with it. But in 1902, they realized that there were gears inside. And so once they realized that there were gears there, it became a much, much more interesting item to them from an archaeological standpoint. Um, and so this device essentially would have landed somewhere around 13.4 inches by around 7.1 inches by 3.5. So it's not like super large, but it is like a pretty sizable chunk of metal. They did find it as one cohesive piece, but it's been separated out into multiple fragments um, as part of conservation to like figure out what these are and how they work. Um, and so they have spent a lot of time trying to figure out what this is and how it functions. And for a long time, they struggled quite a lot with it just because the metal was so decayed. But they over time have managed to figure out, primarily through the use of essentially like a 3D X-ray, um, which has been the most effective at getting them like text that's engraved in the metal and things like that to like more definitively show them what it is and how it works. It had like instructions on it. So like they were able to determine a lot once they were able to 3D X-ray it. And essentially what they found is this item would have had almost a crank to it. And it
Hmm.
functioned to show you astrologically where everything would be. And it works almost like a calculator where you could turn it and it would follow what would happen. So if you wanted to know, this would have been used primarily by like ancient Greeks, is their assumption based on
Hmm.
this dive and the history of it, where it was found, how old it is, all of that, in the language that was written on it. They had a lot of value in the skies. The heavens were very, very deeply tied into all of their mythology and a lot of their theories, and there's a lot of just ties
Yeah.
between things that the ancient Greek thought and what
Like
was going on in the skies.
math and like chemistry and stuff was
Yeah,
very much like the Middle East's
yeah,
like
that was
primary,
their deal.
but like astrology and calculations on like star
Astronomy
charting
kind
and
of
astronomy
stuff and
is
very
such
Greek.
such a Greek thing.
Very
And yeah, they
Greek.
were such experts at it to like a
Yeah.
degree that honestly was probably a basis for a lot of the stuff we know about like charting in space even
Yeah.
Mm,
today.
Yeah. And so they built this so that you could essentially turn the gears and it would show you, like, even as far as like 5 years out, when there were going to be um, eclipses. You could see where the positioning of stuff in the sky was going to be. It was complex enough to show the adjustment in the moon cycles and like how the moon moves in the sky because the moon doesn't always follow the exact same path. Like the moon kind of
It's
it follows
elliptical,
the same path, but it
kind of.
moves around in a way that's not the most concrete, and so there's a little more complexity there in the patterns, and this
Hmm.
mechanism was still able to account for that.
And that's why we
Um,
get super moons is because it's when the moon is closer.
yes, and
Um,
so they included essentially the irregular orbit of the moon and the functionality of it. Like this is a very, very complex machine. They believe that it probably was constructed by Hellenistic scientists, and it would have been dated to around 87 BC. Um, so they think probably there is some potential of between like 150 to 100 BC or 205 BC. It's hard because it would have had to have been constructed before the shipwreck. They can on some level date the metal, but it being underwater for so long really changes the way that material adjusts over time. And so they have a lot of scale there when figuring out exactly when it's made. They have a stronger idea of exactly when the boat sank, and so like they know for sure it was before the boat sank. But outside of that, they're making some conjecture on what the age of that metal would be, just because of how the science works with that metal being underwater for so long.
hmm.
But they have dated multiple lines of evidence that puts it at around 70 to 60 BC as well. So there's no super concrete date, but they have a pretty good idea that it would have been very, very old. Um,
Yeah. It kind of
basically,
reminds me like of it reminds me of the Great Library in
yeah,
Avatar. And I
that's
wonder
hmm
fair.
if that's what they based the concept of
Maybe,
that
yeah,
off of that.
because it does. I can see where you would draw that connection for sure, like looking at the functionality of it and stuff.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. When was when was like Alexander the Great in charge?
Oh, let me look.
Oh, he was earlier.
yeah, 356 BC is when he was
Yeah.
born.
Okay, so yeah, he was
So he was a little bit earlier. I
Yeah,
mean, because I was just thinking like
yeah. So one of the real wild things about this is that there is no examples of machines with a complexity similar to this until the 14th century in Western Europe. Um, that is that is so much time
that's
gap. So
crazy.
like this was a super, super complex, super advanced machine. The functionality of it is like sometimes they compare it to like computers and like things of that nature just from how it calculates and how it functions.
Yeah.
Just because a lot of computers were initially created, like the old IBMs were like just a really complex calculator, before turning into like what computers are now. There are estimations that if they truly would have like fully understood the capabilities of what they produced, they could have been on the moon in 300 years. Like if they truly got all of the scientific implications of how that machine worked and the gears they had in it and like the complexity of that, if they would have like fully used it besides just going like what's the moon gonna do? Like following that trajectory of like understanding. They're like they could have been on the moon real fast.
That's so wild.
That's insane.
Absolutely bonkers. And
And
so,
it's so singular too, where it's like there's nothing else quite like it. But again, it's like navigation is and like especially in accordance with like the sky and angles and like those sorts of maths are
yeah,
such their thing. So it makes sense, but it also doesn't because it's there's nothing else like it we've at least found in from that
Yeah.
era.
like in theory, could something else exist? Maybe. But like this is generally referred to as the first known analog computer. The quality and complexity of its manufacturing is absolutely wild. It is so accurate in terms of astronomy and mathematics. Like it
Hmm.
is crazy accurate to where things actually would be.
Yeah.
It it is a wild
And
feat of science, and it is so far removed from anything of that nature that exists anywhere else that we know of. But yeah, so I thought that one was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's funnily enough, it's in one of the story programs I use with my students. It's one
oh,
of the
okay.
sixth
Yeah,
grade passages, and it doesn't call it its name, but it just says it's an ancient calculator.
yeah.
But it's so funny because that program, especially the older grade stories, have so many things where I genuinely was like, the last story is the Tunguska event, and I was like, ah, like, or like I've gotten
Yeah,
ideas from it, like they could,
yeah.
and then the kids are like, meh, and I'm like, what are you talking about? This is so cool.
Uh, but yeah, so lots of cool technologies and machines and things that we're just still a little perplexed.
Hmm.
Either how they existed at the time they existed in, or like how they managed to essentially disappear from the face of the earth after they created them. Why are they digging really, really large caves and then presumably
Yeah.
not using them very much? Like, what is happening in the world?
Yeah, it's they don't hit as like they aren't as strange to me as the manuscript.
Oh, the Voynich
Oh,
manuscript
the
is the
Voynich.
oddest item I have ever encountered in my
Yeah.
whole life.
But these are all very, yeah, it's like, and I
Hmm.
love that. It's like, I always think of the metal, the sword metal that we can't,
Damask steel.
yeah, that we can't
Oh, yeah.
do anymore. It's like
Hmm.
there's such a tragedy to these like lost arts, but it also makes them so special.
Yeah. It
Hmm.
is a little akin to, I know there's like lists of hobbies that are dying, of like people
Yeah.
aren't really doing these art forms anymore.
Hmm.
And like these methods and concepts are sort of being lost. And I know you can find like lists of some of these. So if you feel like learning how to do something interesting, maybe consider picking up a hobby that is needing some people to be able to carry on how it works.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Me personally, I don't think I'm gonna get into barrel making, but
I don't think that's a hobby for me. Um, I'm not built for splinters.
no.
Yeah.
I Similar to my chemistry, any woodworking project I've done in school is an abomination and should never have been made.
Uh,
Yeah. I think that there is something very special about doing like I guess like crafting in general, but like analog activities.
yeah,
Hmm.
Like like ceramics and when I did ceramics for a little bit and I think that it's just like there is something that's so like innately human about it
Yeah.
yeah,
of like this is like what has separated us from like the rest of the animal kingdom
yeah,
is like our ability to like throw pottery onto a spinning wheel and like bake it and like glaze it, like all of that stuff.
Hmm. Or even like there's such artistry in like we take them for granted, but like clocks and
Yeah.
watches
True.
and like a lot of clocks and or I mean, yes, a lot of clocks, but also a lot of watches are very, very like sophisticated. Like
Hmm.
they're kind of crazy technology for the fact that they're kind of, I guess, like not super recognized as such,
Yeah.
at
Yeah,
least
I mean,
not in by the
like
general public, I'd say.
kind of like taken for granted, like in a way.
Yeah, definitely. Like
Just
a go ahead, go ahead.
like not recognizing the like how incredible it is to have something like this made. Or like
Hmm.
right, like something with the so like the mechanism that we just talked about,
Yeah.
like the exactness to which you need to
Like the gear
create
teeth
the gears, right?
alone are so particular.
Yeah.
Like you can't just like the idea of doing something like that, like watch parts are like made with computers now.
Yeah.
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 Or I mean not I'm there might be somebody who makes something all by hand, but like
Yeah.
musical instruments, I think about that too, like handmade musical instruments, absolutely incredible.
Oh
There
yeah.
Like
is like I don't know if you've ever
mm,
seen it, but there's this really specific kind of violin, or stringed instrument. I believe it's a violin. If it's not a violin, it's
mhm.
like a viola or something terribly similar. And this person would make them, and they have such beautiful sound, and they
Oh,
cannot figure out how they
yeah.
made them, particularly like the kind of sealant that they used and like
Yeah,
the stain they
it's
used in creation. Like they cannot figure out how to replicate it.
Yeah. There's such
the
fabulous technology in musical
Yeah.
instruments. It's a wonderful point.
Yeah.
is it the it starts with an S, right?
Maybe.
One of my favorite things is seeing how I love the huge and tiny versions of various instruments that exist. Like, have you ever seen like I think it's like a double
Um,
contrabass flute. It looks
Stradivarius
crazy.
violins is the ones that he used like a special
Sub contrabass flute is what I was
material
thinking of.
on creating them that they just can't. So, and like had someone that he like taught how to make them, and they have replicated the exact instrument like 100% down to the smallest detail, and it
Yeah.
still doesn't make the same noise. And they're like,
Is
we
the
don't understand. And they think it's the
Stradivari?
like material used to finish the wood. Yeah,
Yeah,
Stradivarius, I think.
yeah,
Stradivarius, something like that.
Stradivarius. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's see, there's the crazy
Yeah,
flutes. There's the lowest of the flute family is
yeah,
the hyper bass flute, which is but there's also the sub contrabass flute. And these things are like they look like a pipe organ. You should look them up. They're wild. Or
yeah,
like because like everyone contra bass clarinets are common enough that like people have seen them at least.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
But like yeah, just on that topic of there are some wild instruments out there,
yeah,
but I love that
yeah,
because strings feel very like there's a mathematical balance to strings, and obviously there's a mathematical
Yeah.
balance to all
yeah,
instruments. But there's
Yeah.
something so funny to big woodwinds to me because it feels just like, what if we made it even longer?
yeah. Um,
Oh, well, Morgan's a little delayed for me. Hopefully that doesn't affect the overall audio, but we will see.
Yeah.
yeah. The struggles of internet on occasion.
If
It's
Um,
anything's cut because of internet hiccups. We were talking about the what kind of violin?
Stradivarius.
Stradivarius.
Stradivarius violins, and just
Yeah.
in the discussion
Nice.
of like very intricate mechanisms. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love like
Yeah.
a
There's
grandfather clock or something. Like analog
yeah.
technology is very, very interesting.
Yeah. I will
It's
say
so
one thing
cool.
about grandfather clocks though, like one one thing about them is that like don't have them near your bedroom
Oh yeah, no.
because
Bad call.
I
like would be
always
so
Yeah.
bad.
It would be so annoying. I always think of the one from the Addams Family where it's got the little, and some of them do. They have little like statues and things that come out and dance on the hour and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I always think of that
Yeah.
because it's Morticia and Gomez, and it looks like they're gonna kiss, but then he's just like in basically motorboating. And it's like within the
Is
first minute of the movie,
yeah. Such a good
masterpiece,
movie.
cinematic masterpiece.
10
Anyways,
out of 10. But yeah. There are so many cool ancient historical things that they made that were like, that's cool. How'd you like do that though?
yes.
Hmm.
Um, and
I
this is just a
yes.
handful of them.
There's so many like it it's so special that we've been able to preserve them in some way even if we don't
Yeah,
fully understand them,
yeah,
even if it
Hmm.
is really sad that we do not fully understand the technology behind them. But obviously we love mysteries here and I would love to talk about this again,
yeah.
more of these
Yeah.
sorts of things.
And
Or
I think
more
so
like
many of
musical
them,
instruments too.
yeah,
Just like
That could
yeah,
be fun.
yeah. But so many of them are so much more interesting than just like the how'd they build the pyramids? Like I feel like there is some complexity and some amazement there in the creation of that, but I think there's a lot of much more complex and fascinating items that we still don't
Hmm.
really understand.
Like
hmm.
how did they make the pyramids? Simple machines and slave labor. Like
Yeah.
it was not
Just
aliens,
so much
sorry.
slave labor,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like they would roll it up a ramp with like wooden dowels,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But
Like,
anyways,
would it have sucked? Yes. Did lots of people probably get injured and or die in the process? Probably. But like,
absolutely
Yeah.
is it something that we truly cannot comprehend how one would do it? Not really.
no.
Yeah.
Anywho, that's not the topic of this, but the more and more we do this show, it feels more like walking into like an oddities shop where it's like, I just want to,
What is
this is my weird thing I got last week.
it?
Yeah, it's like here's an ancient device. Also, here's a gorilla in a top hat.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're a little eclectic
Mm.
around here.
So, if you'd like to listen to something else completely unlike anything we talked about today, we have lots of episodes up. Lots. We have about, I think, eight, maybe, episodes up of various topics involving sort of mysteries throughout history or just odd phenomenon, anything unexplained, unsolved, unnatural is sort of our jam. We don't have a ton of supernatural stuff that's up online. So a lot of those was our radio stuff, but we do have
Hmm.
one on the Kraken if you're interested in something like that.
Yes.
Uh, so if you are still interested, other than mom, uh, I think those that might be up your alley if you would like something a little different than this.
Oh,
Um, Other than that, thank you for bringing the topic. It was very
for sure.
interesting.
Hmm.
I did not know
Love some
about
weird things.
the first three at all. Those are
Hmm.
super cool.
I do enjoy looking at some odd history things.
They are fun.
If you like odd history, may I also recommend you listen to Historically Speaking, featuring Bree and friend of the show Alex.
Yes, where we talk about anything and everything you have never learned in your history class. So far we have an episode about the Edmund Fitzgerald, and then one about Lama Pan, and then we have one that I still haven't uploaded yet, but I will tonight about Tchaikovsky. I just have to add a footnote because I said something that feels so egregiously wrong, I must correct myself.
Uh, fair.
So,
Very
It'd be like
good.
that sometimes.
yeah. It was about ballerina hierarchy, and I'm like,
Ah.
I literally called it my first love. I can't do it that dirty. I was basically
Fair.
saying you had to be the prima ballerina to be considered a ballerina in a ballerina company. No, you just need to be employed. To be the
Mhm.
t to be the prima ballerina is to be the top ballerina. But
Yeah.
anyways, I will make
Fair.
that note on the other thing so you don't have to
Yeah.
listen to it twice. Or
But
maybe you do.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, no, I think I have like seen some stuff about the Portolan maps, but most of it was new. Obviously, I've heard about like Greek fire before, but like the ins and outs of it, which we still don't know, is
Super
we're
neat.
making some
fascinating.
conjecture here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the last one is definitely the most interesting though for me too. Just the
Oh, it
like
was so
hmm
cool.
I love
it's
it. It's so
yeah.
neat. You should definitely look up photos of it if you haven't before
I
because
Yeah.
yeah, I
yeah,
do. I spoil myself a little.
I do sometimes look throughout the cup I looked at and I was immediately like,
Yeah.
I want to drink cran grape juice from that there drinking vessel.
It would be so good.
The desire to fill a cup with grape juice and slurp away.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Give me
Oh
a
gosh.
silly straw for that cup.
Oh.
Yes, please.
So
Silly straw, ancient incomprehensible chalice, pool floaty, lazy river. Now,
good.
now.
Sounds like a fantastic day, really.
Tiny, tiny bitchy sunglasses.
Yes.
For sure.
Umbrella in the
Umbrella
cup.
in the cup. That would be incredible. All right, we better end it here. I think we've been waffling for like 10 minutes.
Yes, but thanks for tuning in and learning about weird historical items that are mystery that we still don't understand.
Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you for bringing the topic again. Thank
Yeah,
you for
thank you.
listening to Hypothetically Speaking, where we talk about anything unexplained, unsolved, and unnatural. We'll see you again sometime soon. Good
Mhm.
night, everybody.